Hey, Facebook world, it's Andrew Stone here, and it is so good to be with you this evening. And with, of course, the wonderful Dr. Ruth Knight. Ruth, how are you doing?
I am good, really good. Pleased to be
Tell me,
here.
tell me, you are one of the best optimists I've ever met, and someone that brings so much life to the room. It's always been such a privilege to be in, your environment and in rooms that you've led and in seminars that you've done. Tell me, how have you felt through this last season of, be it isolation? Like, how and what's your posture been as a
Yeah,
leader?
yeah,
Obviously, we're going to talk about strategy in a minute, but how do you feel right now in the process and the things that have been going on?
yeah. Look, I'm not going to deny that I think for everyone it's been, it's come at a very fast pace. But I also know a lot about leading change, and sometimes it's actually a really good thing to have not too long to think about, things that we have to adapt to and be agile to because we have to respond in positive ways.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty much sure I'm like everybody else. It's all come as a bit of a shock this year, and it's like we didn't expect that. But I've been incredibly inspired by people who have really said, we're not going to let this get us down, and we're not going to let this stop us from delivering services, from running our
Yeah.
organizations, from still
Yeah.
caring about people, from still doing all the things that we know we need to and we're passionate about. And I have seen some incredible stories of agility, adaptability, and innovation that's come out because of this crisis. So I think that, yeah, I am very optimistic, and I think it's been a good time for people to go, whoa, can we survive this, and how do we survive
Yeah.
this?
And for you, it wasn't just a false optimism. That kind of like that optimism that has no significance, or it has no weight to it. I mean, you managed change before in multiple industries, and seeing that, what, at the end of it, if we take care of people, serve people
Yeah,
well, are generous. One of the things I'll never forget learning from you is that generous people are more attractive. Like,
yeah,
it's in data, like
yeah,
it's actually a study that
yeah,
generous people, altruistic people, are more attractive.
yeah.
So, it's the real deal. What have you, has there been a story that has inspired you at all in this season where you've gone, wow, that person really bounced back or really innovated, really, was remarkable?
Oh my gosh. Um, I think, uh, whoa, you put me on the spot now because
Sorry,
I want
I
to
know I
share.
do that. We've got a lot of people watching. Maybe think about it. I'll do a few shout outs. We've got people from New Zealand watching, from Brisbane, from the Gold Coast, from all over, Australia watching, from WA, from Perth, people wanting to hear your story and hear your strategic thinking and planning, which we are definitely going to get to.
Well,
But I
I
just know you're such
totally,
an inspiring person,
yeah, no,
and
look, let me share with you, I suppose, a very
please, yeah, let's
close
do
to
that.
home experience because I work at a university, and I have seen literally a university that cares for thousands and thousands of international and national students, and in the space of weeks have completely restructured the way that they deliver their training programs, their courses. We have also had to do that, think dramatically about, okay, how do we keep people engaged? How do we keep supporting students who are in the middle of their studies? And,
Yes.
this, they want to keep studying, we're not shutting down. And we have, and it's been a most incredible thing to witness a whole university and a whole team of
Yeah.
academics and administrators and people who so passionately care about what they do, and they've had to respond to students having to go home to
Yes,
international
of course.
countries and everybody going online, everybody.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so I suppose that's the closest to home that's
yeah, of
happening for me
course,
right
of
now, and
course.
some of the innovations
Yeah,
that have come out of people
Yeah.
having to engage online, students where they would normally have a class of 100, 200, sometimes much more than that,
Yeah.
in the classroom, and
Mm.
suddenly now they're using Zoom, and they
Yes.
have to still engage the students in the
Of
same
course.
way. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. We all moved to a digital format very quickly,
yeah,
and no matter how good you were ever at technology, you learned new things in this season.
yes,
Unprecedented times meant we had to dig even deeper for connection, and I know you're a deep believer in that. The real deal, the authenticity of a human connection. And so, with all of that said, not only are you a great people person, but you're a great strategist as well. And so, our conversation this evening, and for those watching from all over Australia and even New Zealand, I want to say thank you for being a part of our world. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. Whilst we're speaking, you can ask questions. We really would love engagement. I'll tell you something that I have never, ever been in all of my leadership journey, in all of the seminars I've ever sat through. I have literally never been in a meeting as engaging as Dr. Ruth Knight. Like, I have literally what she does in order to engage people in a team environment, in how she, how she connects everything and makes people, there's things people come out with in these spaces that they've never talked about before. It's a great space that she creates. And so we're going to try to do that online tonight so that you can
yeah.
actually be vulnerable. We can talk through some of your journey, your strategy, what you could be struggling with, maybe some things that you're winning at. But please, we would love for you to engage and think through maybe some of the strategic struggles that you, or leadership struggles that you are going through. So let's just I've got a few thoughts that I've written down and we worked through. So tell me, Ruth, before we jump into that, why are you so passionate about strategic planning, thinking, environments? What stirs you to love that so much?
I think it started really early on in my life. I grew up in a home that was very passionate about community issues, social justice. My parents were foster carers,
Wow.
and I really grew up very quickly realizing that we needed to be compassionate to those in the community that were very vulnerable. In fact, we always had people in our home with
Yeah.
different issues and who were homeless, and yeah, I really grew up in a home that really was searching for ways that we could reach out to the most vulnerable in our community. And
Mm.
so that instilled from me from a very early age that we need to look for solutions to some of the most complex health and social issues in our community. I ended up training as a nurse, and when I was training, of course, I learned a lot about looking for solutions to health problems. I was training to do that, and so again, I think that instilled with me the idea that we have to assess a problem and say, okay, what could be wrong? Let's look at some of the symptoms. Let's look at why they're sick. Let's look at the different options of how to get this
Yeah.
person well again. So again, I think that probably instilled a lot of my attitude towards problems and
Yes.
looking for solutions, but using different techniques and not ever going for that one solution, really trying to think about different perspectives and, well, could this work? Could this work? Is this right for this person? And then I moved into community health. So I took my knowledge into a community setting, and I've worked for 20 years in housing and homelessness, working with young people. And of course, coming up daily with issues such as, why are people homeless? Why is
Yeah.
there mental illness? Why is there domestic violence? Why are people sick? And why is there family breakdown? All of those sort of social issues that I've been dealing with on a daily basis throughout my
Yeah.
career. And I think how I became really interested in the whole concept of, well, what is strategic thinking then? Because I was kind of learning things but not really naming it. And I
Yeah.
think it was because I was getting so frustrated with
Okay.
not finding solutions.
Yes.
I want to reduce homelessness. I want to reduce domestic violence. Those are
Yeah.
real things that I want to find solutions for. And so when things become frustrating to you, I think that's when you have to search out and say, well, what can I do to try and test and pilot and prototype, and how can I do that? And I started to really look at, I was obviously then doing a master's program myself in
Okay.
business,
Yeah.
and so starting to look at how different both researchers but also practitioners in the business field were looking at problem solving in business field. And so I've kind of meshed a lot of my social issue passion, my social justice passion,
Yeah.
with the business knowledge that
Okay.
amazing, incredible leaders within the business sector use to do strategic
Yes.
planning. And I've realized that we can do both. You know, we can take these incredible ways of doing leadership in a business sense, but
Yes.
use them to solve social problems and think
Yes.
about how we as organizations, whether that's a for-profit, a church, a non-profit, a social enterprise, how we can use these tools and resources and techniques to solve any problem that we want to
Yeah.
solve.
And there's so many watching that I know their stories, and I could name them all that are watching that are so involved in social enterprise, and yet have a strategic background or have been in business before, and really, their goal is to mesh the two together. So the fact that you have the insight, I know that they're going to just work so well tonight for those watching. And if you are loving Ruth and what she's bringing, why don't you hit some love hearts, put some likes up, react, and let's get that conversation going. You've got a couple of thoughts around why strategy fails. Why in some issues they break, in some issues they thrive. So it can be given the same issue, and why does one thrive, why does one break?
Yeah, I'm going to put this question out to you. I really want to put this out to everybody online right now and ask them, can we show the question?
Yeah, we can. Let's do that right now.
Let's show them the question. Let's get the conversation started. I really want to ask you, why do you think some organizations adapt gracefully and thrive while others crack and buckle under the same conditions? I think it's an awesome question, and it's been very
I definitely think so. And so those that are watching, we are asking you that question of
Yes.
why do read the slide, have a look, have a reflection of maybe in your own journey, in your own story and experience, why do you think some of these things, some people and organizations will crack or buckle and or thrive, even though they're given the same situation?
Yeah. Has anybody got some ideas? Because I think this is one of the most important questions that we can really ask ourselves, especially over the last few months.
Especially now.
That is just very topical.
Exactly.
But I think that at any point in time within your organization or your business, you need to be thinking about what are the conditions that will enable my organization to thrive and grow and just be strong in what I'm doing, really achieving some goals, rather than constantly being frustrated, buckling, and possibly failing.
Yes.
In the same conditions when we know some others really do very well.
Well, we've got a comment from Trent Freckleton, who's actually a great guy. I've met with him for coffee multiple times. He's part of one of, in my opinion, one of the most inspiring not-for-profits and charities to be a part of, International China Concern, work all over Asia and China in particular with abandoned and disabled children. And he is part of the international team, but lives here in Australia. And this is what he says, Ruth. He says, I think it has to do with agile leadership, leaders who can change the organization to external circumstances. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely agree that a leader is very pivotal, and it really is about how the leader is responding to both internally and externally conditions, what's going on around them. They have to be very open-minded to what is going on. And we know that 80% of your culture within the organization is led by the leader's thinking and actions. So how the leader is talking, how the leader is thinking, what the leader is doing will really influence what everybody else in the organization is doing. So I
Okay.
do agree, leaders is very critical, but I even want to drill it down and ask, so what more particularly is that leader doing?
Yes. We've got a few thoughts here from my friend in New Zealand. He says perspective of the heart. From Renee, a strong leadership team who motivate and inspire their teams. From Lawrence, they surround themselves with capable people. From, of course, we both know Pili Ramdani, a great friend and leader of ours. He says a combination of leadership and culture capacity to implement. Lawrence, another Lawrence from the Kapiti Coast. Okay, so Lawrence is so you'd love Ruth. Actually, Ruth and Lawrence Kirby should connect because I know for a fact that he is leading a faith community, but so involved in the literal community. We always laugh and say, he's the unofficial mayor of the city. He'll laugh, and I'm going to get a message, I'm sure, from him because I've said that live. But he's the unofficial mayor of the city, and it's because he has such a heart for the city and the community around. And of course, Linda says clear culture and clarity, which is so true. Linda Partridge, when you were talking about being a nurse and helping people, and that got you into that philanthropic space, Linda is the equivalent in New Zealand, and you got to give a shout out to the New Zealand crew because they're 2 hours ahead of us. So this is like 10 something at night for them, and they're up, with their coffees watching us. So I appreciate you all. And Linda is that equivalent of what she do in her community, and
So I want to
serving people.
acknowledge everybody that has mentioned the word either culture or strategy. And you get double brownie points if you put two words in the same sentence, okay?
Yeah, Lawrence wrote the unofficial mayor. He said, "You've got to be kidding." He's laughing, but it's true. He's a great leader. And just like you said, it's culture and strategy. It's the ability to marry both.
Okay.
There's an old saying, which I think has truth to it, but I'd like to dig deeper with you because sometimes we can just put a meme up or we can put a statement up and then it becomes the macro journey for everyone. But maybe we can put a little bit perspective to the idea that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Okay. So the reason why I really wanted to pick out those two words is because I've done a PhD on culture. So I've done a lot of looking at what culture is and how it's described and how it influences organizations. But guess what? I don't believe culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'll let that just sink in.
While you're saying that, there's people that are going to have to take plaques off the wall and stuff, and change their screensaver. Let's dig deep, Ruth. Tell me what you think. What are your thoughts are there?
Okay. So I'm going to just clarify what I mean. What I mean is culture is nothing without strategy, and strategy is nothing without culture. They are so intertwined, and they need to be so compatible with each other that it is not one or the other that is actually more important. Because you can have a beautiful culture and you can say, we care about each other and we're very, but you do not become a high-performing team or a high-performing organization unless you have a fantastic strategy. And the strategy is nothing, and it is just on a piece of paper unless you have a great culture, a great team that knows how and why to deliver on the strategy.
So if you would say, sorry, you go.
No, you go. You've got to stop me.
So if you were to say, so let's just say one of the big words that we talk about right now is a culture of collaboration, right? The generations have spoken that we're not just about hierarchies anymore. We don't follow people just because of titles. We want to collaborate with those that are gifted, regardless of where they sit in the organization. And so let's say there's a strong culture of collaboration. So that's what we talk about. That's what we celebrate. So what you're speaking into right now is saying have a culture of collaboration. But if you're not collaborating around the right strategy, you're going to really collaborate around nothing.
The water cooler.
The water cooler. Okay, so so there's got to be an anchor point to the culture.
Absolutely. Your culture is what defines the way that you talk, think, and act every day as a group, as a team, as a organization. So, you can't just say we have a culture of, high performance if you're not every day acting like a high-performing team.
Okay.
You can't say we have a culture of integrity if every day you're not thinking about the way that you are thinking about integrity and the way that you're acting integrally, if that's, you know what I mean.
Of course, so yeah. And we've got a question here. We've got a question here from a great leader from the coast, Pastor Rod Gilchrist, who is what I would consider one of the greatest mixes of philanthropist and pastor, marketplace and ministry. He's had the ability to be a business leader and an influential spiritual leader over a region, not just the Gold Coast, but a whole region. And he asks this, in this climate, what would be the one thing you would say to our leaders to encourage them to carry the church culture or faith culture in a cancel culture world? Like, how do you carry both? Like, what would your thoughts on that be?
I'd actually like to know a little bit more about that question. And maybe, Rod, you can just tell me a little bit more about what's leading you to that question, because I think that what I've understood and what I've seen, because I've worked with a lot of organizations, faith-based, non-faith-based, small organizations through to large organizations. And what I've realized is that your culture is really about who you are. It's the interior motives and purpose of who you are. Now, when you have an external brand, so when you go out and do your business and do your work, that brand and purpose, that inner qualities of who you are and what you're doing, has to be integral, has to be compatible. Because what happens is that many people see one thing and hear another. And unfortunately, I've seen that in churches, sometimes people get disgruntled with the idea that they're not seeing what they're hearing. And I'm certainly not saying this this is not a sweeping statement, but I'm just saying that I think churches in particular have to be very careful that they're not saying one thing, but people are seeing another. So you don't have to be just a church to have, love and compassion as one of your qualities, of your values. But if you say, for instance, love and compassion is one of our characteristics that defines who we are as a group, as an organization, then by golly, that's what people have to hear, that's what they have to be thinking about, and that's what they have to be seeing to really then go, yeah, I see it, I hear it, and I know it. Yeah. And that's true culture. When people then go, I want to stick with this company, or because it could be a company, it could be Virgin Airlines, or it could be Apple products. We're talking similar kind of concepts, or it could be an organization that we're donating to, because I've been doing a lot of research in the last couple of years about donors and who they give to and the kinds of organizations that they give to. And they want to have that kind of same perception that the culture is being delivered, and it's same for church. So I don't know if that's kind of.
So I think are you saying that culture needs to be consistent internally and in the external narrative, so that the story that you tell is not different here, and the expectation then is externally different? I was speaking to a couple of their CEOs, they're partners in the medical industry, and they run this successful practice and working with young people and their mental health, and they're just great people. And we were talking actually about the opposite. where we were talking about internal culture, and sometimes the things that we put out to the clients and the customers and to the community is all about, you know, unity and love and everything else. And but if the internal team isn't feeling it, then that can be just as bad. So it's not just about your external story. Your internal culture with your team and your staff has to marry up to what even so if you're giving the clients the best, you also have to be able to internally give your team the best as well.
Absolutely.
We're actually getting a lot of questions, Ruth. You're going to really enjoy this. You're going to get a lot of enjoy this.
Started. Yeah, go on, Andrew.
We've got one from Perth, all the way from Perth. My great friend Mark Godfrey. He says, how does an existing culture and mission in an organization work to retain its core whilst growing with a new strategy and leadership change? Would you like me to repeat that, or
No,
did you catch
I'll
it?
tell you straight away.
Yeah.
You keep talking about it all the time.
Yeah.
And you challenge yourself all the time, like
Yeah.
daily, on a regular daily basis. It's at the top of all of your meeting agendas. It's as you open your computer, you have your values there.
Yeah.
Everything must align. If you have some very solid values that depict who you are and the culture that you're trying to create, you must keep talking about it. You must keep referring to it. You must keep, because as you know, Andrew, when you're thinking about something, it kind of comes to pass, right? It kind of becomes part of who you are.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what clothes you put on, what hairstyle I have. I'm still me, and I've still got my values.
Yeah.
So I think that what we have to do is remember that some people call it our values or your culture values, however you want to sort of talk about it. But whoever comes into your organization in induction, you talk about it.
Yeah.
When you go to team meetings, you talk about it. When you're facing challenges or thinking about new strategies, you align it with your values and say, will this ensure that we're doing, it aligns with who we are as an organization?
Well, I think that like exactly what you're saying is that there's the non-negotiables that have been there maybe from where the founders started. But like anything, we can honor the past, but innovate the future. And I know some of, be it the journeys of different organizations where you have to keep the values that built the very organization we're talking about, but keeping values and not innovating are two different things. Like, you can keep the values and keep the core virtues and even the vision whilst innovating at the same time and not being caught to it. Because actually, the very people that put blood, sweat, and tears into building it or founding it and pioneering it, as you know, we work with pioneers all the time, and they've given their whole life to something. It would almost be dishonoring if you didn't continue to build.
A lot of people say we have a culture of innovation, and I say, where have you innovated? Where are you innovating? And they go, oh, no, it's a bit risky to do anything different.
There's nothing like, being confronted with that.
So if you define your cultural values, you have to make sure that those are the things that you can deliver on every day.
So let's just go through a couple of things. What do you think gets in the way? Like, some blockages to being able to carry out consistently, because we know that after today or after we read a book or after we look at some of the notes, and hey, to everyone watching, we're going to put some of these notes up if you'd like them, so that you can put some of your own questions for your own organization through them. But have a look at, what gets in the way, what blocks us, because we all know that after a really inspiring seminar or something, we go and we change it, we have our meetings, but what eventually keeps us consistent? Like, what gets in the way from us being consistent with it?
And I think I just want to return to that first question that I asked everybody. What is it that makes us thrive or buckle? And it's kind of the answer to what I want to say right now is it's strategy. It's your ability to strategically think
Yes.
about what is going on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis and how you are responding to problems. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, a lot of the culture literature, the culture research talks about culture being defined very clearly by the way
Mm.
that people talk about challenges. And so they did some research. I'm just trying to find it. I thought I printed it out to just tell you about it, but I might just need to send you the link.
Hey, we'll make sure that we get,
Yeah,
whatever you deem appropriate to put out publicly for our community and our group. We'll link it up and send people the link. Maybe tomorrow when you get a chance,
yeah.
we'll just put it in so people can download it. We are getting the very thing we wanted, Ruth, is happening. People are asking a lot of great questions. Do you mind? I mean, I know we've got a framework, but do you mind let's just do a bit of a Q&A? And I think people
Okay,
are
okay, I'm
enjoying
good,
it.
but I
So,
really want to share this because I want people to know how important strategic thinking is as as your culture, right?
yes.
Because so many people say to me, I don't have time for strategy. It's, like we're just doing business. We're like, just trying to survive. We're trying to do what we're best at. But strategic planning
Yes.
is too hard. We don't have 2 days to go away on an annual,
Mm.
away day with all
I've
our
heard that
boys.
before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have time for that. And I have more and more started to believe that strategic planning is not a 2-day event.
It's not. It's not. Say that again, Ruth. They need to hear it.
It is
Strategy
not
is
a
not a 2-day
2-day
event.
Scrap it. Scrap your 2-day events, however nice they are. They're just for team building, right? Just
Yeah.
go and have some fun. No, strategic planning is what you do on a daily basis. And the way that you do that is you build a culture of strategic thinking.
Yes.
This is by far going to have the biggest significant impact on your organization. Because what you're doing is you're getting people to think from a cultural, so it's something you're doing every day. It's a value that you have as an organization to think about the challenges and the situations that are facing you. And when you can give all of your team, whether they are a senior executive in your organization or whether they are a volunteer within your organization that just comes along, once in a while, if you can get everybody to start thinking strategically, my goodness, it's so fantastic what your organization can achieve and do and how innovative it can be when tough times or even good times, it's
Of
just
course.
the whole
Of course.
time, right? Because
Yeah.
you're just thinking strategically. So I want to put that out to people, and if there's anything you take away from tonight, I want you to think about how you can build strategic thinking into your culture.
Yeah. And I like to repeat that statement for those watching, for those writing notes, is it's not culture or strategy, it's both. It's strategy and strategic thinking in the culture.
Yeah,
And sometimes I think we separate the two, yet they're they're the two sides of the same coin.
yes.
And so there's a great question here. It says, what percent of your revenue budget should be allocated to culture, IP, and engaging expertise consultancy? You've been a consultant for major organizations.
Yeah.
What percentage, as you've watched different organizations function, whether they're not for profit or corporate, what percentage do you believe is healthy for the investment?
That's a really huge question, but I have to just tell you that one day I was asked to go and give a keynote presentation to a room full of accountants. And they asked me to come and speak about culture. And it completely initially freaked me out because I thought, my goodness, these people talk numbers.
Yeah.
And I very much doubt that any of them have actually got a calculator out and tried to calculate the impact of culture on their bottom line. And so I took it upon myself to try and make them do that, because I think that so much of the time we think culture is this fluffy kind of
Yeah.
tangible
Yeah.
value that we talk about and is on our wall. But if you've ever sat down and actually worked out what happens when your culture is not good, when there isn't high
Yeah.
performance,
Come on.
when
Yeah.
people are leaving your organization, when
Yeah.
donors are not donating to your organization, when there's
Yeah.
silos and conflict, when there's complaints, or when we look
Yeah.
at all the things
Absolutely.
that cause our organizations to buckle and
Mm.
not thrive, and you start putting a figure against all of that, then I think
Yeah.
you'll be going, oh, I think we should be investing in our culture
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
more.
To jump in there, I was talking to a HR specialist, and he gave me like a very ballpark figure that retention saves you money. Therefore, good culture, good strategy keeps good staff, right? It keeps good team. And therefore, the retention rate of your organization actually saves you money in the long term. And a ballpark figure is like, he said, if someone just leaves, so we're talking entry level to just a little bit higher than that, let's just say, or maybe department leader, but if they leave, it can cost you, and you won't see the money leave. It just will slowly, in time, in resources, in hiring, in filling the gap, having a temp come in or have someone else take on the role, which is opportunity cost, because then it costs you somewhere else. It can cost you up. I want everyone to listen to this. It can cost ballpark, and this is minimum ballpark, nearly $50,000 plus in the long run if you don't keep your employees retained.
I believe it's up to about 4 times the cost of that salary.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you've got a $50,000 salary, just quadruple it. And that's how much you can lose. But Andrew, I want to say it's not just staff.
Yeah.
You could apply the same principle to donors and people that donate to your organization. You could apply the same principle to your customers and your clients. So if you apply that same principle, because if I work in a poor culture or toxic culture, maybe not toxic, but just not a great one, right?
Yeah.
It's going to come in the way that I treat my customers. It's going to come.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and if I'm not in a great culture, it's going to come through to my donors, and my donors are going to kind of pick up on that even unconsciously, because it's the way that I treat people, it's the way that I talk,
absolutely,
it's the words that I use, it's the things that I do. So I absolutely think you're right that we have to start thinking about what does it cost stuff to have a culture that's just not as productive and strong as we want it to be.
There's a question here, and maybe you've heard of it, but it says, how do you deal with founders syndrome? Do you know what founders syndrome is? Yeah. Talk us through that real quick.
So founder syndrome, and I've been a founder of an organization myself, and I know what. So I've been a founder, and I know what this means. What it means is that the founder is usually the most passionate person. They put blood, sweat, and tears into
Come on, we know it.
Okay? Whether it's a business or a social enterprise, a non-profit or a church, whatever it is, that founder has really put their guts into making this happen, and usually over an extended amount of time.
Yeah.
Because of that, they are really the cornerstone of that organization for many years, because they stick around because they love their organization so much. And usually that's a great thing. But what happens is that they don't always grow with the organization. And so the organization can have new people come in, the organization can grow. And what happens is everybody's trying to move along, and the founder is kind of still holding it back a little bit. Obviously, very unconsciously most of the time.
Yeah, because that wouldn't be their desire. That's not what they want.
No,
but it could be subconscious.
Yeah, it usually is. So what happens is that founder syndrome really can cause a lot of problems for organizations. And the first person that needs to recognize that is the founder themselves. And they
Okay.
have to say, I'm going to either step into a different position, I won't be the chair or the CEO
Yeah.
anymore, or I'm going to step away from the organization and now release it.
Yeah.
Or, they have to think of a way, a strategy, they have to think of a way to get themselves out of the progress that an organization may need to
Yeah.
take. So, and it doesn't mean they have to leave always.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does, but sometimes they can. But it's a tough one. It's a tough one
Yes.
because it's
Yeah.
like giving up. In
And
fact,
do you
I've been
find
founder
this like
twice. So
this is something I've just observed. So maybe, this could speak quite broadly. Like, sometimes it's not meant to be a sweeping statement, but it's an observation that is macro rather than micro. Is that the pioneers usually have a very deep passion and vision with a lot of mosaic thoughts built around it, because the desire to either help people or build a business or whatever the core values are have multiple expressions in the founder,
yeah,
but they're not usually great. Again, this is a macro statement, but they're not usually skilled necessarily in the operational day-to-day running of it.
yeah,
And that's usually, in my observations, where it falls over. Is the founder is the big, cloud, in, kind of visionary, but
yeah,
needs to feel safe that if a CEO or a strategist comes in, they can actually put legs to all of it,
yeah.
without feeling like they're competing.
Absolutely, and they have to not feel threatened by
Yeah.
that. They have to know that a high performing team brings many strengths to an organization, and we all have our own strengths, and
Of
we all,
course. Yeah.
we all do things in different ways. Even we
Yeah.
communicate in different ways. We have different perspectives on things,
Yeah.
and
And the
so
founders have a grit. The
yeah,
founders do have a grit that
they do.
sometimes sometimes the next generation or those new people that come in with the operation strategies and even their passion to do something great, but they didn't build it with blood, sweat, and tears. They're coming into something that has already been built. How do you think the founder can transfer some of that grit over, like, some of that trench work over, without them feeling, that it's theirs for the taking, so that there's a little bit of, multi-generational culture?
Two things. Number one, you must always be succession planning. You must
Yeah.
always be thinking about how you are going to get yourself out of your job.
Yeah. Everyone write
How
that down. You're listening to Ruth. If you love her, just put some love hearts. Go write that down.
I want you to think right now, Andrew, who is going to take over Stone Creative Group?
Yeah.
Who is that person? Who can I mentor? Who can I encourage? Who can I think about, the person who will take what I've created into
Absolutely.
a much different, it doesn't have to be better, but a different
Yeah.
place. It could be
Yes.
in that right season, right? In that right
Yeah.
season.
Yeah.
And that might be next week, it might be next month, it might be in 10 years. So
Yeah.
that's my first, always be succession planning. And the other thing was, and I'm trying to remember what that thing was, because my daughter is trying to take her laptop from me. Just on camera.
It's life online. Live.
Okay, go. Yep. Thank you. Okay. There's live for you, right? She's
Multi-generations, Ruth. It's all good.
yeah. Turning the light on and off. So always be succession planning. And the other thing is, I really want to have this as your culture, folks. Be a learner. Please be a learner. Be curious. The best leaders that I have ever seen are people who are willing to learn from anyone.
Yeah,
from your
that's right.
youngest, your newest, your your most inexperienced. You can learn from them
Yes.
through to your most mature, wise, experienced person on your team as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you are willing to be a learner, you are willing to listen to those ideas that come left field to you because you just never thought of those. Because this
Yeah.
is, someone's gone, hey, why don't we do this? Or have we ever thought about this? Or have you seen the opportunity over here? Or look at what someone's doing over there. Or, and when you are a curious leader that's always willing to learn, you're never standing in your own way,
That's right. Yeah.
you are happy to hear people's ideas and you search out diverse views and
Mm.
opportunities.
We've got a few more questions coming up. Is how do we get board culture to align with operational culture? Because sometimes there's this big, it's like the board's here and the operations are here. And how do you, what would be some tips you could give us to get them to align or
I'm
converge?
gonna I'm gonna say something controversial again.
No, go for it, Ruth.
You need to teach your board to be strategic,
Yeah.
and why that is controversial is because most boards would not like to believe they're not strategic. But when operations come to them with operational things,
Yeah.
you are teaching them to be operational.
Okay.
When you go to your board and talk to them about strategic issues and ask for their strategic thinking about strategic issues, then you are encouraging and promoting and fostering strategic thinking.
Yeah.
So stop going to your board, not totally. I mean, I'm not saying they shouldn't know anything about the operations, but I am saying that I think if you looked at your agenda of your board agenda,
Yeah.
and said what is operational and how much time do we spend on operational matters, it may surprise you. You need to find the balance, because as I said, I'm not saying you need to throw out operational issues, but you need to make sure that it is not so heavily weighted that all your board is doing is thinking about what you're doing operationally.
Yeah. That's right.
They must have the time, the questions, they must be asked to come and give you strategic advice.
Dr. Peter Little, who was the Deputy Vice Chancellor of QUT up until I think maybe 2 years ago, maybe 18 months ago, he always would ask boards, who are you paying to see the future?
Yeah.
Who are you paying to see the future? And if you're not, you don't have a future. Because I think his then statement was, great leaders can foresee a problem and have the resilience to outlast it. And I think that's pretty much what you're saying. It's don't just get involved with this side of operations, but what are you strategically building into the future?
Yes. And how are you encouraging your board, particularly, but your executive as well, anybody in leadership within your organisation, to think about the future and think about what would happen next month if this pandemic continues? What would happen next month if half of our donors died? What would happen next year if half of our congregation left? What would happen next year if there was a fire? Just scenario planning. Just spend time thinking about what the future might look like if this happened, that happened, that happened.
Yeah. And that's not being fatalistic. That's not being fatalistic. That's not being, because I know that would come out of you anyway, because you are the ultimate optimist. But even being an optimist, you have to at least have some strategic plans and margins to have space for your organization to thrive in the midst of circumstances that are unprecedented.
Yeah.
We've still got some great questions here. It's one Mark from Perth is asking, how important is empathy for leaders in
Oh,
developing culture and strategy at this time?
one of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
Um, Look, I think empathy is absolutely pivotal. And the reason why I'm not alone in that thought is because many organizations and companies around the world are using what we know is called design thinking or human
Mm.
centered design. And human centered design is, as I said, what huge companies are using, what many social entrepreneurs are using
Yeah.
around the world. And guess what the first step of design thinking is? It's empathy.
Yeah.
Because the clever people
Mm.
around the world who've gone, how do we innovate?
Mm.
They have agreed that the first thing that you need to do is empathize with the person that's using your services or the customer that you want to buy your product or the donor that you want to donate.
Yes,
You
of
have
course.
to understand their world and you have to think about how do they perceive us or how do they perceive what
Yeah.
we do or how do
Mm.
they what do they need. You have to get into the shoes of the person that you're serving, and it
Yeah.
starts with empathy. Yeah.
That's great insight. Get into the shoes of the people you're serving. You should write that down. People put it on a plaque. Get into the shoes of the people you're serving. We want to go through that source
I've got to
strategy.
tell you a question. I just got to tell you a story. Can I
Yeah,
tell you
tell us a
a
story.
story?
Go,
Because
go.
it's a
Totally. Let's do
really
it.
great one that really demonstrates the importance of that. And this is told by a friend, he's a colleague and a friend of mine. He told it to me, and I'm not actually quite sure whether he was part of this. So if you've heard this before, bear with me. He said that he was doing a lot of international work and he went into the Republic of the Congo, so an African country that was very war torn.
Mm.
And this group of people who international aid people went in to consult with the communities in this Congo region that was very war torn. And they went in with a lot of assumptions about what their aid and what they were
Mm.
going to do to
Yeah.
help this country. And so they sat down with the people, they were doing empathy, right? And they said, tell us about, what's going on for you right now. We're here to come and help you and we want to know how to help you. And he said that they went in with a whole group of assumptions about whether it was going to
Yeah.
be building houses,
Mm-hmm.
building
Mm-hmm.
schools, it was that they had all these kind of like assumptions. And he said, do you know what the people said to them was the biggest thing that they needed help with? It was rebuilding the roads,
Wow.
rebuilding the roads. And it blew the international aid people's minds because that was they had never considered that. And the people said it's because all the roads, we can't trade, we can't go to
Mm.
market, where,
Yeah.
so there was a whole lot of reasons why the people wanted roads. And so that is what they said, okay, well, then that's how we're going to help you.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I just think that's an amazing story of how empathy led to innovation and real true
Yes.
community development because they listened to the people and
Yes.
really were open to learning and not going in with their own ideas and their own assumptions.
No, that's a brilliant insight. We've got a question here. How do you pivot in different phases of organizational development and growth? So how do you pivot in different phases of organizational development and growth?
Well, pivot is an interesting word, only because when I hear that word, I'm thinking change.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm thinking that pivoting does not mean significant change. Innovation does not mean significant doing things wildly different.
Yeah.
So I suppose I want to respond by saying, if you're going to change, why? Is
Yeah.
don't change for the sake of it, but know why and when and how to change.
Yes.
Have a really good rationale and then take people on that journey.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to come on that journey. And if it's a small change or a large transformational change, it could be, but really know why you're doing it. Again, it comes back to strategy. Like, what is the reason for you thinking we need to do something different, or we need to grow, or we need to, get new donors, or we need to run a new project, or we need to, reach different population, like whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
So I would say, whatever you mean by that, I want a really good understanding about what's the strategy, and then how are you going to take people along on the journey of change with you.
Yeah, I like what you said there, in response to the idea of pivoting. It's not just pivoting, it's then taking people then on the journey. And Paul, who asked the question, is one of the best relational leaders that in an organization that I've seen work through so much change. He really does take people on the journey. So in the midst of pivoting, keep digging deep relationally, because people follow a narrative, not just a document.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's a couple of other things. There's a question from that asks here, what online resources or books can we recommend? I'm gonna let you go first.
Look, there's a whole heap, and I'm happy to share. Like, really look for some great books, and I've got some that I'll share later with you. And anybody can just contact me, and I'll send you a list of things that I've found very valuable. But
Yeah.
do we have time to quickly share something called SOAR?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got that ready.
Yeah, I'd really like to share something really quickly with you, everybody online tonight, because I think that if you're going to take away a strategy as a tool for strategic thinking tonight, this is the one that I think will find.
Do you want to pull that up on the screen?
Yeah, let's put it up.
Okay, here we go.
Now, many people have heard of SWOT, SWOT, and if you haven't, go and look that up. Okay, but many people think that SWOT is like what you should do, but I love SOAR much better. This was designed by a researcher that was looking at how we can use strategic thinking within organizations that were very strength-based. And she started to use appreciative inquiry to make sure that organizations were leading change and thinking strategically. And so basically this is a development of the SWOT, and I can tell you that SOAR just makes my heart sing so much better than SWOT. And I think that it's so simple that anybody in your organization can do it and can get it.
Yeah.
And also you can do it at any time, anywhere, about anything. So SOAR stands for Strengths, Opportunities, Aspirations, and Results. And strengths, if you get her little book, I've got it up there. It's SOAR Building Strengths-Based Strategy. It's called the Thin Book of SOAR. If you get that, you'll see that she explains that what you do is you go through a process of asking yourself some questions around strengths. So what are we really good at? What do we value? What are we, how are we unique? So you really sort of talk to yourself about some great strengths.
Yeah.
And you talk to yourself about opportunities. So what are the opportunities? What are our stakeholders? And they may be internal stakeholders, they might be external stakeholders, they might be customers, they might be donors, they might be whoever, right? So you think about the opportunities to meet the needs and the desires of your stakeholders. Yeah. And keeping in mind, obviously, your environment, your funding, you've got to do a little bit of exploration depending on what you're using this for. And then once you've done that, you talk about aspirations. And these are questions around, what do we care deeply about? What do we really want to achieve? What do we want to change? What do we want to have impact? Where do we want to have impact? Ask
Yes.
yourself all of those aspirational type of questions. And then after that, you say, well, then how would we know if we were succeeding? What are the measures of success to tell us that those aspirations are being met or not? What are we learning from that? So there's a whole piece of learning and continuous improvement in that results part. Now, I also underlay, this is me personally, not SOAR particularly, but I underlay 3 perspectives that you need to keep in mind all the time: people, systems, and strategy. Because all of those questions and the sort of things that you come to agreement after doing this exercise, you need to always consider the people, the systems, the strategy. So this is a really quick, easy tool that you could start doing tomorrow and just start talking about the way that you use this throughout your organization in any shape or form, and just start testing it, just start using it and see how people enjoy it, getting used to having a tool. Because, Andrew, I do talk to people about the fact that, if you become a plumber, a hairdresser, a pastor, whatever your trade is, you need the right tools to do your trade.
Mm-hmm.
And a hairdresser can't cut hair without scissors,
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And a builder can't build things without a hammer. They get the right tools. So if you are a leader of an organization, you need strategic thinking tools. Mm-hmm. And because you can't just become strategic if you don't have a tool. You can't cut hair if you don't have the scissors, right?
Yes.
So if you're sitting on this live tonight going, I really want to be more strategic and I want to have a great culture. Well, what's the tools? What are you using to achieve that goal? And I'm just suggesting that SOAR is one of those tools. It might not be the right tool for you, but it might be as well. If you've got nothing else and you're not using any other tool to help your whole organization think and act more strategically, start with SOAR. Start there.
It's a great framework, and I was taught, obviously, the good old SWOT analysis, and that obviously has merit. But SOAR definitely has what I like the term aspiration and results, simply because if all you're thinking about is your threat or your weakness, you end up becoming a micromanager of fear. Yes. So being able to look at aspirations and results makes you more collaborative rather than competitive. And so with that particular framework, I'd like to encourage everyone, including myself. There's some documentation I'm going to be changing tonight in our consultancy. So that's what we're going to be changing it to SOAR, or adding it to some documentation around culture and even measurements of qualitative values, and being able to see how it works in different contexts. So I would recommend for just a couple of books that are very interesting to read. Was number one a book called Humanize with an S, and just in case those that are thinking that an American wrote it, no, it's Humanize with an S, so Humanise, and it's an orange cover, and it's got a picture of Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, and Martin Luther King Jr. on it. And the other book is called Canoeing the Mountains, and how it's really a book about adapting change. And I think we're in change right now. We've always been in change, but this was like a global macro, every level playing field. Everyone was changing very, very quickly. We're going to wrap up really shortly.
I've got one more for you, Andrew.
You got no, please, let's do it.
Book written in 2015 by Olson and Simpson. This one's an interesting one. It's called Leading with Strategic Thinking: 4 Ways Effective Leaders Gain Insight, Drive Change, and Get Results.
Can you just
So
repeat that real quick for people?
it's called Leading with Strategic Thinking: 4 Ways Effective Leaders Gain Insight, Drive Change, and Get Results.
Right. I think there's been so much engagement in this conversation, Ruth, that we may have to go through the comments and have a little bit of a look through some of the questions. Maybe we have some thoughts in the next day or so, to look through, and we'll do our best to be able to engage with you in the questions that you've asked. I'd like to thank everybody for being online. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for being vulnerable in some spaces and being so available for us to speak into your world. Ruth, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to
Yeah.
just share? Anything that you would just like to share to the people listening and will watch later?
Yeah, I want to leave you with 2 final thoughts. And I think if you're going to take anything away from tonight and keep reflecting on this, the first thing that you need to do is build your culture capabilities. That means build the capability of your culture to really think strategically about the challenges that you're facing right now, or the challenges that you may face in the future. Become resilient through that. And the second thing is use tools that enable you to confidently see complex challenges as opportunities. Turn your challenges into opportunities. And if any of your team come to you saying, I've got a frustration or I've got a challenge, ask them to turn it into a how might we. So how might we ... And if you, that is an incredible way of turning the culture into something that's not about, those threats and weaknesses all the time, but it's really about, yes, we can turn this into an opportunity, and that will get people thinking creatively and strategically.
Brilliant, brilliant. Now, if you're watching this and you've enjoyed it, why don't you comment, give some love and a shout out to Dr. Ruth Knight. Hit all the love buttons and the like buttons and everything else, and
please connect with me on
show us some
LinkedIn.
love. But I'd love for people to connect with Ruth.
Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit. How can people connect with you or get your resources?
Yeah, look, come and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy. I do a lot of posting on LinkedIn of resources and research that we do. I'm also on Twitter if you're a Twitter person. Look, come and connect with me on one of those 2 places, because I really love sharing ideas and thoughts and research with people. And and you can send me messages and say, how do I learn about this, something there as well. So, and also you can always give me an email if there's anything else that you need any help with.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much, Dr. Ruth Knight. You are always a pleasure to have and speak to and be encouraged by. You inspire us just by the grace that you carry and the love and passion you have for helping people. So thank you. You're an amazing leader, amazing woman, and a great voice of wisdom to leaders that are growing and needing to grow in so many areas. So I appreciate you personally, and I know the Stone Community Group does as well. And so thank you. Thank you to everyone who's watched. We're going to sign off now. Until next time, we will be continually supporting your creative leadership journey. Connect with us. Share this with people that you know it could help. It's an investment of time, but it could change so much in their world and their life and their leadership journey. But share it, tag it, and of course, invite your friends who you know will benefit from being part of this leadership community. Stone Creative Group on Facebook. And we appreciate you. We look forward to resourcing you even more. So God bless you. Have a great night. And of course, please keep commenting and any questions, and we'll get to all of them in time. So thank you so much, and we'll chat again soon.